We're here today with Daniel Nahmod. He's a singer-songwriter, and I met Daniel a couple of years ago, more than a couple of years ago, actually. We were singing for a positive music event, and he was one of the artists there, and I was not only intrigued with his voice and his songwriting, but his whole business sense and how he's arranged his career and put together a really good livelihood for himself, and not only that, but something he really enjoys and gets up to do every day, which I think is so important. So I want to talk to Daniel a little bit about that today and just see what it is he's done, what he's doing right now, and we'll go from there. So Daniel, what do you do in the music business?
I produce records, I write songs. Actually, the simple answer I give people is I write a song, I record the song, I perform the song, I sell a recording of the song, I go home, hug my wife, hug the dog, go to sleep, wake up the next morning and do it again.
And you're a happy man doing that.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Pretty good life, yeah.
So how did that start for you?
It started with a combination of a lot of accidents and a lot of hard work. So it really started as I was a computer programmer in Chicago. I think I told the story to your class one day. It started when I was wondering why the corporate life wasn't working for me and why the cubicle life wasn't working, why the 401k and stock options and salary and lack of debt, why all those things weren't making me happy.
But you were doing well at that, right?
Yeah, I was doing pretty well. You know, I grew up programming computers. I'm pretty sure I told your class. I mean, I grew up using computers since I was a little boy. So the first PCs and such. So for me, programming computers was something I could do, just wasn't something I was meant to do. You know, I also type, you know, people say, well, you could always do that as a fallback plan, whatever. Well, I type 90 words a minute too, because I was taking typing when I was learning programming, but that doesn't mean I should be a secretary. You know? So just because you have the skill to do something doesn't mean it's what you're called to do, you know, or inspired to do, or makes you most happy to do. So for me, music was that thing, always. And
so you were, when you were at your job, you were thinking of music?
Always. I was the guy who was whistling and tapping like I'm a terrible tap dancer. So people would hear me tap my feet in the cubicle and whistle in the cubicle. Probably drove them crazy, whistled down the halls, always music going on in my brain, always, 24 hours a day. Wow. So quitting the computer programming was a big step. That was in December of 1997 that I realized that the reason why I was unhappy was that I was building a life that was wrong for me. So I suspect most people can relate. Whenever I've told the story on stage, there's always a good number of people who can relate. Right. You find yourself on a track, the track makes sense, the track works on paper, and it develops a momentum of its own. Whether I sometimes say I was lying for a living, which is true. Whether you are actually lying for a living or not, there's a momentum to a series of decisions, whether it's a relationship decision or a professional decision. You end up heading in that certain direction, and it takes on a life of its own, and you forget that you had a dream to do something else. So I was fortunate enough to remember on one specific day, December 4th, 1997, I just remembered that I was lying to the job, I was lying to myself, I was lying to the girl I was engaged to at the time, and pulled the plug, all of it, unwinding all of that life took about 7 or 8 months. Wow. And in 1998, I arrived in Los Angeles, rented a crappy little rent-control apartment in West Hollywood, and made my first record within the first 6 months, and started singing. I also, one of the lucky coincidences or good fortunes that I had was that I was raised to be a nice boy, and I am kind of a natural, I don't mean this to sound grand, I'm a natural humanitarian, or philanthropist or something. I'm natural at that. I always used to sing at my Bubby's nursing home. I've always enjoyed giving music that was uplifting in some way. I'm not a saint by any stretch, but I always enjoyed doing that. So I happened to find a community of people where I could be a nice boy who sang uplifting music and wrote uplifting music, and they were incredibly responsive to it. So the other thing, of course, I happened to be good at it, which was also kind of good fortune. And there's a lot of practice and many hours of working at it and thousands of performances to build on being starting off decent, of course, and maybe not even as decent as I thought I was
Right.
at the time. But all those things conspired to find me an audience, find me a style, and find me the beginnings of a livelihood. So from that first album on,